Kitty, you have to move. He keeps still in my chair. Come on. Come on. I know. We gotta talk about the video games. Alright, I'm gonna put you down. Hey there gamers, DreamcastGuy here. Today we're talking about the future of Resident Evil because apparently the DLC for Resident Evil Requiem is already complete. We're going to talk about those leaks today. And also apparently Capcom has just greenlit a complete remake of Resident Evil 1. Now, this is a very controversial choice. A lot of the original Resident Evil fan base has very much been debating about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. If there should be one untouched Resident Evil. I mean, the original RE already actually has. There's already a remake of RE1 that's already quite perfect. Do we need them to do it again? Let's break it down because these leaks honestly paint a very strange timeline for the current production of the RE franchise, right? It sounds like, according to the leaked timeline, we're getting a Code Veronica remake next year, a Zero remake in 2028, and then finally Resident Evil 10, and then now, I guess, Resident Evil 1 after that. Let's break this down because some people are saying, is this a good move, even if it is profitable? Well, let's discuss. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, a lot of people are sort of talking about this almost phenomena, right? Which is that over the last couple of years, Resident Evil has always been a very, very big series. It's easily the most popular horror franchise of all time. When it comes to video games, it's managed to have tons of spin-offs. It's managed to have tons of side characters. It's had its own set of incredibly profitable and crazy remakes. But what's wild is just the fact that it keeps growing in popularity. Almost every other franchise, you'll have your ups and downs, but historically, it seems like every single Resident Evil just sells more and more and more. 7, 8, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, 4 Remake have all sold literally 20, 30 million copies each. They are just insanely popular games. And what's wild is that apparently Resident Evil Requiem is already just going nuclear. It's one of the biggest games ever on Steam. It's now apparently the highest day one sales ever on PlayStation. It's just truly difficult to grasp it. And apparently they're trying to keep that money train rolling. So let's break this down because honestly, this game is so good. I love Resident Evil Requiem a lot. I actually just finished my second playthrough this morning. This game is just so good. I'm kind of curious, though, about that downloadable content, right? About, okay, as good as this was, what stuff may have been put into a side story? Because with Resident Evil 4 Remake, obviously some of this interesting stuff like Separate Ways, the Ada Wong stuff got put into DLC. I'm kind of curious what extra stuff, extra story bits get put into that DLC. So, this is Dusk Golem, obviously the king of Capcom leaks, but this dude here says, a lot of people have asked about it, and I have a tiny little bit to say. Not a lot, but a bit. So let's talk about Resident Evil Requiem DLC. I'm fully aware there's Resident Evil 9 DLC that's late in development, though I think that's hardly surprising. I think since Resident Evil 5 and every Resident Evil game, except for obviously the remake of Resident Evil 3, have had some form of DLC. Separately, we have an RE6, RE3. They're all supposed to have these small story DLCs that end up being canceled. Resident Evil 6 had some Claire DLC, but what's interesting is that RE9's DLC was originally conceived to help space out the release between Resident Evil 9 and the upcoming Code Veronica and Zero remakes back to back. Now, this is something I've actually been talking about on the channel, which is that for this last 10 full years, there has been a strategic pacing to the way that they're doing Resident Evil. We're getting a lot of Resident Evils, but they're basically doing new game, remake, new game, remake, new game, remake. And so this has been a good way of sort of being that introduction, right? Oh, you want to check out Resident Evil 4? Well, here's Resident Evil 8. All right, you're curious about Resident Evil 9? Here's Resident Evil 7. There's always a game that feels like this own contained cool adventure. And if you want to go back and play the previous one from even though the year before that, it's usually way cheaper and still fantastic, right? It's built this cacophony of growth where constantly everybody is just so excited for the next release, which a lot of times is coming so soon. But this is the first time where they're doing 2 remakes back to back. And as excited as I am, I'm kind of curious if this ends up leading to a lot less sales. Because I do think that everybody's so excited for that future of Resident Evil, and all these remakes are utterly fantastic. I think Resident Evil 2 Remake might legitimately be the best horror game of all time, but it is interesting that doing this back to back, I think even Capcom is kind of thinking, is this the right choice? So Resident Evil 9 was originally going to come out in 2025, but it got delayed, so the DLC should be releasing in a far closer window, especially with Code Veronica Remake slated to be announced this year. Previously, I mentioned Alyssa. The reason for that is I'd heard they had a fully playable version of a rigged up that I heard was not playable in the main game. It was being made for something. No other context than that. However, more recently, I've been hearing the rumors through the grapevine that now it's very likely a Leon Kennedy DLC. This to me seems like the obvious moneymaker. Like, as much as I like Alyssa Ashcroft, obviously I really like the Outbreak games. I just feel like she's not quite the moneymaker, right? I'll be honest, playing Leon is just so fun in this. I'm still in the frame of mind where I'm kind of hoping personally that the new mode we get, I hope the DLC is something like Mercenaries. I hope maybe it'd be really cool if there's some sort of like multiplayer, like some sort of co-op or something like that. I don't know. I would like some sort of like combat in this game is just so fun. I want to have like that fun mercenary style mode, maybe an additional story thing as well, or a prequel mission, but I really want to have something where I can just mow down zombies with practically infinite ammo and rack up high scores. I love that stuff so much, but I do not know the scope of RE9's DLC outside of it existing, but I can take some educated guesses. So the director said there will be stuff to keep people playing RE9 long after the main story. So most RE Engine games have post-launch boated content. That seems likely, and if its story DLC is Leon focused, could explain why I know of Alyssa being playable is some bonus DLC mode. But to see, I'm aware of some content that was cut out of the game, so evidently really late in development related to Leon. There's also some dev comments from interviews that say Leon was not present in the final game. I have some suspicions about maybe this was a repurposed in development. So this isn't exactly uncommon, where, in developers talk about certain scenes or modes or flashbacks and stuff, and they end up just not being in the final game. In fact, there was even talks with like Resident Evil 8. Originally, Ada was going to show up in that, and they just cut her at the last second. I think there's even a lot of concept art, and I think I've even seen some leaked cutscenes they did with Ada in RE8 that they just ended up saying, this doesn't really fit what we're trying to do, so they ended up cutting it. So for the release timing, I don't know of Capcom's plans, but I'm very suspicious about those Resident Evil 9 amiibos coming on July 30th that had weapon skins and such. It seems like part of triggering the DLC marketing push, if you ask me, but that's where we're at presently. So this is interesting. Some people are talking about Alyssa being Big Mama. Some of the stuff that Dusk Golem has talked about ended up being slightly off. One of the things that Dusk Golem did talk about that he ended up being sort of wrong about is that he said I don't want to show the gameplay of it, but there's a big motorcycle scene that's very funny in the final game of Resident Evil Requim. Apparently, at one point, Dusk Golem was saying that the bike was being more drivable, that instead of just having it for one scene, you were actually going to get a chance to drive around in the destroyed Raccoon City. In the final version, obviously, it's pretty much used for one very funny scene and pretty much no place else. But here's the other one I want to talk about, because this remake of Resident Evil 1, I want to quickly show you this. Currently, if this fits the current timeline, that means that 2027 Code Veronica Remake, 2028 Resident Evil 0 Remake, Resident Evil 10 2029, and now the full production of Resident Evil 1 Remake. Now, Capcom has been taking between 4 and 5 years to make each of these games, so it still seems possible that there is a good chance that 2030 is when we get this RE1 remake, but some people seem to be a bit split because there's already such a good remake of Resident Evil 1 that taking the time, the effort to stuff, what could be new about it, right? The remakes we got of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, those remakes are fantastic, but the Resident Evil 3 remake is famously hated for a reason. It just feels very greedy in a way, right? Resident Evil 3 Remake is fun, but it's just missing basically all of the soul that made the original RE3 so good. I'm a little bit afraid about this just because on its heart, I almost think that Resident Evil 1 still in a lot of ways is the scariest of all the Resident Evils, right? Even the original RE Remake on GameCube. That game was actually terrifying. Zombies jumping back up, the crimson heads, a lot of the puzzles, Lisa Trevor chasing around the mansion. It's actually scary. So turning that into a third-person shooter, as cool as that would be to see, I'm almost still thinking, is there going to be some extra fold to that, right? So to be honest, I have theories about why it's cut. So need that RE1 mansion mention. It's being cut for a fact, but I only have speculation on it, but I think I have a reason. So the next mainline Resident Evil is Code Veronica Remake. In Code Veronica, there's already a callback to the RE1 mansion. Everyone knows that. Likewise, I'm aware that more recently, the full production of the RE1 remake has now gone underway, though years out as the time of this writing. So imagine if you went from RE9, having a total mansion section, then you have the mansion-inspired section in Code Veronica Remake, and then after that, you're playing the RE1 remake, which is just the mansion again. I'd like to start to feel very samey, not very special at all. Going back to the same location many times in short succession. I think that has a lot to do with it, but just my speculation. It's pretty obvious Capcom has already built the assets for the remake of Mansion for RE0 Remake or Code Veronica. You clearly see the clues in RE9, Road Hill, and Imagine zombies that are very RE0 and RE1. Like, a lot of people in the comments are saying, like, okay, this makes sense, but the thing about this that I feel like I want to see the most is I kind of want to see what they have in it that really makes it extra scary, right? Because I do think that the Resident Evil 2 remake is scarier than the original. I think the enhanced lighting, a lot of stuff, having Mr. X really chasing you down, seeing his cold, soulless eyes in 4K and stuff, it's very, very effective, right? I'm just curious. As a huge fan of the original Resident Evil, I do want to see this remade so much. I mean, I'm still that kind of person where I like Resident Evil 1, I like Director's Cut, I like RE Remake. People kind of forget it, but they also did a remake of RE1 on the DS that was called Deadly Silence. I'm just in the space where, as excited as I am about this, I'm going to say I hope they change it a lot. I hope it has a ton of new puzzles. I hope the mansion is at least slightly reshuffled. You got to keep some stuff like that big fancy staircase and stuff, but I want to be really surprised. So the first time I play it, I'm actually like feeling that fresh fright. I guess at that point I'll be in my mid-40s though, right? Oh, that's a weird thought. But what do you think about the idea of a Resident Evil 1 remake? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below, and how do you feel about the new possible DLC just being more Leon goodness for Requiem? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.